Still haven't chosen a name for the podcast.
No.
But that's all right. So what I've been thinking about lately, and I had a conversation with AI this morning actually about it to prepare.
Do you name your AI?
Okay, that's really funny that you bring that up, because last night I was talking to Ricky, my brother-in-law, and he said that I mentioned the name of our AI is Sage. And I haven't researched this, so that I could be like making myself out to be an idiot. But evidently, like a significant percentage of users of ChatGPT have named their AI Sage.
I have staff members who name theirs.
But is it named Sage? The specific name Sage
No.
is the name that, like Ricky said, like a ton of people are using.
Really?
And so he's like, did it ask you for options? Like, did it give you options, or did it list you like some options and y'all picked Sage out of the options?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think so. I remember my kids just saying Sage, I thought, and but I asked ChatGPT, I was like, did you give us options and Sage was one of them? Like, is there a reason that Sage is one of the most popular? And she's like, no, I didn't give you an option, y'all. That's what y'all picked, blah, blah, blah. So I haven't researched it, but he said that like he heard that like a ton of people named it Sage. And I was like, that's really weird. But no, we named it Sage. I don't say, hey, Sage. Like,
Why not?
I just don't think about it. Like
Really?
I forget over and over what the kids named, named him or her. I don't even know. But yeah, I was like, basically argue with me. I told you about how I wanted to eventually do something like that.
Yeah.
And it was pretty impressive, considering this is not the customized one that's specifically told to argue and all this sort of stuff, but it was kind of pushing back on the concept. And this is the thing I'm wrestling with. I believe, and I have believed for like years, probably past 12 years, that tariffs are fundamentally unethical or immoral.
Okay.
On the basis that free trade is a human right.
Okay.
And for someone else to basically say, here's an artificial line in the sand,
Right.
and if you're on this side, you're going to be taxed or penalized, or we're going to impose a tariff on you. It to me feels like essentially theft, right? It's essentially stifling free trade between two free individuals.
Right.
And I was like, I believe that's immoral, and it pushed back. It was like, well, what about whenever countries have, or using slave labor, or using, bad environmental policies, and et cetera. Like, tariffs can be a way to kind of put pressure on them to not do that. And I was like, fundamentally, I feel like tariffs, or I should say, using economic pressure like that to try to fix humanitarian issues, is basically saying, okay, these people are doing something immoral with their slave labor, environmental stuff, or whatever, and so we're going to use this economic method to put pressure. Whereas if it was actually immoral enough for you to put economic pressure on them and to stifle, in my opinion, a human right, then it's worth putting boots on the ground. I believe that if there's a reason to put tariffs on a country, then there's reason to use force. If you believe that if you believe that our responsibility is to, police the world, so to speak, which is what tariffs are doing. It's just an extension of world policing to a certain degree. Whenever it's done in the guise or the supposed motivation of humanitarian reasons, which is what for years and years it always was. I don't think Trump's even espousing that that's the reason. He's just doing it for America First concept.
So that America can boom.
Right.
That's what he said yesterday. Boom,
Right.
Boom,
And from a pragmatic perspective, I don't know all the details. Like I told you earlier, I don't know all the details about what Trump's done and all the different things. What the country's done before, the history of it, et cetera. But I do have a problem, and I push back against people who have this mentality that Trump is just being an idiot here, or being malicious towards the American economy. Like, people are like, oh, he's trying to reset the economy. I've heard people, this is a pretty popular thing I've heard, that on the left side, like, Trump is trying to reset the economy so that he can like push a digital currency, so that he can basically cause a bankruptcy of the whole economy, and in the long run switch it over, one world kind of thing, or maybe not one world, but like kind of have more control over the financial industry in America specifically, and that he's trying to bankrupt us. And I'm like, I think that Trump's actually doing this for economical reasons, and he's not stupid. Like, I think that he actually knows what he's doing, and we've seen it time and time again so far, where he's put these tariffs in place, and people are like, "This is horrible. This is gonna," and then the people cave, right? The presidents of this country,
Right.
they cave, and that's because Trump realizes something that people don't seem to understand, which is America is one of the biggest importers. It is. I think it is the biggest importer in the entire world. And we import, it's not even close. Like, so we're importing so much that when he puts tariffs on other countries, like, they're going to struggle, right? Because it's a two-way street, and it can really hurt them because they're selling a lot of stuff, and it's going to hurt their economy really bad if he puts tariffs on. And that's why they're caving so fast. But again, that's from a pragmatic perspective. I'm not saying that his methodology isn't technically, like, it may work, but the means, or the means don't justify the end, right? Or the ends don't justify the means. But the reality is, from a moral perspective, do you think there is any moral justification ever to impose, and again, it's a tax, on two free individuals because of an artificial line in the sand that's changed multiple times throughout centuries?
Well, no, and heck no. Let me see. Taxes. Tariffs. So, well, see, don't want to take the devil's advocate side, or I want to take your side. So, like, I don't disagree with you at all.
Right.
Like, if me and you, I have this bottle of drink, and I want to give it to you for $5, right? It's up to you to determine whether or not you want to purchase this, right? Now, obviously, I've assigned a value to it, and now you got to determine whether or not that's a value that you're willing to accept in exchange for it, right? And then actually, you taking that Coke may actually have a greater value than the $5 that you're giving me, right? But as soon as, third party comes in, and it's like, hey, Philip, for you to move said bottle from here to there, it's going to cost you $1. So now it's $6. And basically what you're saying now is, well, one of the implied things is, who do I pass the cost to? Do I absorb the cost, or are you going to, right? And that may then in turn say, yeah, I'm about to walk away from you, Philip, and go down the road and either find another Coke at $5 or less, or drink water, right? So I think the moment somebody jumps in the middle trying to be the arbiter of two free-thinking individuals who have agency, right? Yeah, I think it's immoral. I think I like to push the envelope a little further. It's like borders up on slavery, because who are you to come in to determine and make choices for me? You're trying to make a choice for me.
Fundamentally, that's what slavery is. It's the same. I was talking to a friend about this. Socialism, for example, right? Same concept. It's like, I actually had a debate with Sage, or
Sage. Okay.
Yeah. Because I was kind of like, all right, I think I asked you to list human rights or something, and it was like listing all these different rights, and I was like, okay, you can't have a right to something that requires someone else's labor.
We talked about that in ethics class actually yesterday.
To me, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
And I get it. I was raised, well, not raised, but I guess probably from the age of 14 to like 19-ish, I was really in more libertarian circles to a great degree, because of Ron Paul and different things like that. So I guess it makes sense to me because it's confirmation bias, right? Like, But I haven't heard an argument against it that makes any sense, where someone can go, no, you can have a right to someone else's labor. It's like, it sounds good if you think of it from a big picture, where it's like, okay, free healthcare, or free housing, or free this or that. It's like, everyone should have this, right? There's a difference between saying everyone should have this,
and then the execution,
and everyone deserve or has the right to this,
it.
right?
Yeah,
I believe everyone should have water to drink. I believe everyone should have food. I don't believe that it's the government's responsibility or right to force the neighbor to provide those things.
Right.
And of course they say, well, no, we're providing it. But how are you providing it? Through taxes, right? So you're still having to take from
somebody,
Peter to Paul, so forth. So I think that it's fundamentally immoral to again, it's these artificial lines in the sand, right? The borders that we have are not fundamental to reality because they've changed consistently throughout the years. And so for you to go, well, you're on this side of the sand. That's literally what it is. It's like, okay, you're on this side. You know, you're standing there at the border, and guys like, I want to trade, you know, your cow for my horse or whatever. It's literally theft. It's literally extortion. It's going, okay, I don't like this trade for this reason or that reason or whatever. So therefore, you know, you can't do this without a penalty.
But just to think about it though, so now when we was talking before we went recording and stuff, so United States imports more than anybody else, right? So then by implication, there's more foreign products here in the United States that have the opportunity to be bought than American-made products, right? So isn't it the responsibility of the government to protect its citizens so that more American products are sold? So shouldn't we, or the government, put on these taxes, tariffs, to either have these other countries make a different decision, or more importantly, have more American products be bought and sold?
That
isn't it better? Isn't it more?
That assumes that having American products bought and sold is a net positive.
Okay.
For America. If the American people decide that they prefer to buy, you know, let's say steel. They say we want to buy Chinese steel because it's cheaper, and they can export it over here, and it's still cheaper to buy from China.
Yeah.
All the way from China, than to buy steel from American manufacturers. Well, that benefits the people that are buying the steel. I remember talking to a farmer who said the steel tariffs, and I'm sure he was a Trump supporter, but he said the Trump tariffs in the last term really hurt him because the steel tariffs really damaged his ability to buy certain things and as cheap. And so you're still hurting Americans.
Okay.
You're just hurting them in a different area, right? Like you may be helping certain industries and you might be creating some jobs, but then you're also hurting other industries that are benefiting from the cheaper prices, and that's the free market. People have this weird thing, I think, especially in the U.S. and Western society, of thinking free market is in like it's our market. No, the free market is worldwide. That's the whole point, because that's the best way for you to get the best, you know, the best product, because then you have all the options. It's like you don't want to go to Walmart and have 3 different options, but they're all American options, but they're all really expensive and maybe they have bad ingredients.
Okay.
Right? You want to be able to have all the options that they are presented. That's the whole concept of a free market. And then if you have all the options and then you decide to buy the American product because the American product is better and because they worked really hard to get their prices down, then great. It's literally the same argument. Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. Merit, right? Is it called a meritocracy? Is that the word? We should be living on basis of merit and making economic choices based on merit. Now, to kind of push back against that concept about the tariffs, you could also say that merit involves moral working or moral kind of the workflow of the businesses in, let's say, China or Mexico. Let's say that they're doing immoral practices and whatnot.
Yeah.
You could say that they lose some merit, and so the government could, you know, be the person, the arbitrator that says, well, these people are doing these immoral things, and so we want to penalize them and make and kind of give Americans incentive not to buy from people that are doing these immoral things, right? I can understand that, right? Not the government's job, though. It's not the government's right. It's not the government's job in the Constitution. It's not. It also, we have no reason historically to believe that the government would be a good arbitrator in that. They don't do a good job of doing that for the right reasons. They nitpick on which tariffs and which places they want to tariff, and so it clearly kind of shows their hand that it's not about morality. It's not about humanitarianism. It's about, you know, power or control or whatever. And maybe it is about booming the American economy in certain areas, right? Maybe your demographic of voters are in certain industries, and so they're going to be benefited, right? Drill, baby, drill. Is like, okay, that sounds great, but then, and yeah, you're creating American jobs in certain industries, but there's other industries that are going to be hurt because of that. But I think that from a fundamental perspective, you cannot justify putting any sort of barriers in between two different free individuals who are making free choices based on what benefits them the most, right? And one of the things ChatGPT or Sage said was like, well, tariffs are kind of put in place by countries that are taking advantage of the economy of another country. And I'm like, because they're not contributing to that economy with their trade. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. If it's a trade, it is contributing to the economy. You're just saying that it's not contributing to the economy in the specific way or the specific amount that you deem, you being the government, is enough or is appropriate for the specific type of trade. But that's not your decision to make. That's the market's. The market gets to decide what kinds of trades and what prices on certain goods should exist. We know this from the times that socialism has been tried in full-blown scale. Governments couldn't figure out the price of bread, right? They can't figure out the price of goods, and so it falls apart. And to believe that the government would be, benevolent and doing this for the right reasons anyways, or competent, right? Like, what's funny to me about these arguments from the left and the right, because when Obama was in, I'm pretty sure he levied tariffs as well.
I'm sure he did.
Most presidents, I think, in the past 20 or 30 years have levied tariffs, maybe even way farther back, but I can pretty confidently say that most presidents the past 20, 30 years did. And so now everyone on the left is like, tariffs are horrible, we shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, all right, well, first, it seems a little hypocritical. Like, I'm pretty sure you weren't talking so badly whenever it was Obama or whatever. But that being said, you still have to deal with the fact that these people are, these tariffs are being levied and people are being affected, right? These individuals are being affected. And you can't make an argument whether it's good or bad based on, in my opinion, based on Americans versus another country's people being benefited, because I believe that America first is idolatry. That's, again, a personal opinion. But I think that whenever you're saying that America, to me, it's a form of what is the word? I don't want to, it's not racism, prejudice. It's a form of prejudice towards America. And I understand the concept of it. It's like, no, we're a country. We should be focused on America first. The thing is, with tariffs, you're not even doing that. You're actually pretending to be America first, but you're stifling Americans' ability to sell things for what they want to sell things for, and import things for the price they want to import things for, right? So you can't ever say that you're putting America first by telling any American that they are going to be penalized if they trade with free trade with certain individuals. It's like, hey, we're giving you more freedom, or we're giving you more, we're making you great again by taking away your freedom, or taking away your right to free trade in this specific capacity. And now people are like, well, you can still trade. It's still your choice. But it's like, no, you're still putting a tax on it. You're entering into the situation. If this was like an actual scene where you saw two people and this was happening and a third person came in and was like, hey, no, everyone would be like, that's messed up, right? But when it's the government, somehow people have this mentality that the government's going to do better. Even though if you ask anyone on the left or right, do we trust the government? No. Like, everyone's like, no, we don't trust the government to be competent. We don't trust the government to be moral. We know the government's corrupt. We know the history, blah, blah, blah. But then they continue to pretend that somehow the government in these positions at certain times, if it's on their side, if it's their party in power, that suddenly they're going to be doing it. Yeah, they're going to be doing it the right way. It's the same argument that I have against people that are anti-conspiracy theorists. Automatically, they're like, you can't be a conspiracy theorist is ridiculous. Like, to saying the government would do that. And I'm like, but your theory is that some person did that, and you have no problem believing that. Right. What is the government made of? Persons. It's like, why are you so? It's like, well, this reason or that reason. It's like the government has all this accountability, or it's hard for them to. It would be hard for them. It's like, that's the craziest thing ever for me. The whole concept of like, these people could be villains, these people could be doing the bad things and stuff. It's easy to believe Al Qaeda did it or whatever, but whenever you say, what if this other thing is true, even though we have history and history books stacked, that show governments have worked behind closed doors to do things for their own good, so to speak. Yeah. It doesn't matter. People, and I think it has to do with clinging to security or kind of because if you actually genuinely believe that the government is potentially malicious across the board, or has the potential to be malicious across the board, it really can like breed despair. You know, it can really cultivate a sense
I think it's
of
easy.
insecurity.
It's easier to say the government because it makes it nameless, faceless.
That's true too.
But when you press the issue, but the government is made of, maybe you don't want to face the fact that maybe your neighbor, the person that leaves for work every day and goes to some concrete building and signs in and gets paid off of your tax dollars, they're making decisions that are negatively affecting you. And we don't want to, people don't want to face that. Because left and right, not only do they, in some cases, they hate the government, in other cases, they want the government to be their ally to force the other, their neighbor, to do what it is that they want to do to them, right? To make their world, have their vision of whatever come into reality. So, you know, when you get to now the terrorist thing specifically, you got government officials thinking they're doing the right thing. They're doing the moral, just thing, because recently this week, it's kind of like it's an eye for an eye. It sounds real a juvenile argument. Well, these countries have punched us in the face. We need to punch them back. You hit him back, right?
Right.
Is that really the argument that we're making, right? Got it. EU, Canada, whoever else been putting tariffs on American products. Okay. What's the better way for American citizens then? I think less regulation at home. How about you start at home first? Less regulation at home. Allow people to create businesses, you know, entrepreneurship, and see what happens here first before you turn into now the economic world police to try to do something. But no, instead, what do we have to do? We got to create a boogeyman, right? We got to kind of unite. It's like war. You referenced it. In order for a war to find support at home, you got to create a boogeyman out there. Them are doing A, B, C, D, and it's a threat to us. So the us is regardless.
Collectivism.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And so now you got this nameless, faceless entity that can only be described as this country, Canada, the EU, whatever. They're trying to do this to America. Of course you want this. It'll come later, though. The prosperity will come later. Peace will come later. The war is just going to take a long time for us to get there, right? The stock market's got to drop, right? You're going to lose some of your 401k, right? There's going to be some casualties, right? It's the same principle, right? I've been to war.
It sounds like the war.
I've been to war,
It
right?
sounds exactly like the war on terror.
It's war, right?
Same thing.
It's the exact
the
same
nameless,
thing.
the terrorist, right? Like, like the government calling this group or this group terrorist, and then a few years later, they're freedom fighters whenever they're fighting for a different. You know, when the government wants to use them, they're freedom fighters. When the government needs to get rid of them or they're in the way, they're terrorists. Right. Yeah. So it is.
But the thing I found is, so when you drop from, I've always looked at war as two governments having a pissing contest against each other, while the people that actually do the fighting are going to be the collateral damage. That if you went over there and visit one another, y'all would have a great relationship with one another, have dinner with each other, share one another's culture, and wouldn't know the difference, right? But you've got, just like in the old days, you got monarchs enlisting sons to do their battles in order to gain resources, land, material, and the like. Now, in this tariff thing, you got two countries in a pissing contest where somebody I would freely trade with without an issue, right? Now we're made to be
enemies. Yep.
Okay, we solved all the problems. Trump.
So
for this in your administration.
Well, I wanted to touch on something. There's a quote that I'm trying to find that I saved recently, but there, I do want to bring up. What's the? So yeah, that reminds me of a quote. In chess, white and black pieces are bitter enemies, but those who move the pieces are usually good friends. So, and it's like. I put this in my unschooling folder on so I save reels and TikToks and things. It's called my unschooling folder, which unschooling is a type of schooling or method of education that's pretty. I think we've talked about it before, but it's pretty like there's a lot of hate, but there's also a lot of people that really love it. I kind of take the stance of like, just like with homeschooling, there's a lot of homeschooling parents that are lazy and that use homeschooling as a way of just basically being lazy. And so the same thing with unschooling. But I've also have friends that were unschooled, and unschooling basically is like where the kid kind of does their own education.
Okay.
Like they are provided the resources and then kind of left to their own devices and encouraged into, doing things like for example, one family, Botkin family, all their kids are really smart kids, like brilliant kids. I think they all got like crazy good scholarships to really nice universities. At least a few of them did. But they were all unschooled, and all I remember from the lecture the dad was giving was basically the way he did it was like he had a library of books everywhere, and they were just laying around. And the kids were encouraged to read. And so they just spent their days reading, like all the time, all kinds of different books, history, whatever. And then I have another friend who's a filmmaker, really smart dude, a really fantastic debater. I would love to have him on the podcast, but he's in well, I think he moved down to Mississippi. I'm not sure, but he's really great debater. We could have him on Zoom call maybe and do a podcast with him. But he was unschooled, and he loves it, right? And I think he's unschooling his daughter. But that quote and things like that, the things that I find that are like there's a moment, a teaching moment about life or philosophy or about like reality or work ethic or whatever it is, I save it. And like my plan is to actually take all of these videos whenever AI is able to like digest videos better, and to kind of create a curriculum based on the stuff that I've saved plus the supplemental stuff that I bring in. I have lots of really interesting ideas. Now you can create your own AI. I mean, you could probably way back, but it's become easier now with Mac Minis. People are stacking Mac Mini base models. Like really cheap Mac Minis are like probably $700. I think they're $700, $800 base model. They're stacking them and then linking them, and they're making their own large language model, and they can train it on what they want to train it on. And so I know Peterson's working on one, and he's training it on like all the classic books and I think mythology. Yeah. Obviously the Bible and things like that. But I want to do one that's for schooling, right? Education. But that brings us to education though, because this is a fascinating one. And this phenomenon happens. You see it all the time. We're both very hyper aware of it. Yeah. People like automatically knee-jerk reaction is just to hate on something that Trump's doing. Yeah. And it sounds bad. If you're looking at it from a bird's eye view and you don't even know the facts, it sounds really terrible, right? He just deleted the Department of Education, right? Like that's horrible. But it's like, okay, all right, fair enough. But then you go, but you're also the same person that said he's levying tariffs unconstitutionally, and that tariffs are horrible because they're unconstitutional. But the Department of Education is not constitutional. There's nowhere that the Constitution gives the government the right over education. Right. At all. Matter of fact, it actually does the opposite. It specifically says in the 10th Amendment that the things that aren't in the Constitution are reserved. And the word there, reserved, like people who have this mindset, I feel like it's kind of like a loose word. No, it means literally, it means you can't. They can't. The government was not supposed to step outside. Yeah. That's why I wish we kind of had the Articles of Confederation, because the language is a lot stronger. Yeah. But they literally were not supposed to create any laws about things that weren't specifically designated to them. And then they create a whole department. Yes. A department that's like a significant portion of the budget. And then we find out, of course, all the waste and all the different things. Right. You know, whatever. You know what? Like, if it was constitutional, I would be like, all right, we just need to fix the waste. But you can't, on the one hand, say he's doing all these things that are anti-constitution, and on the other hand, be mad at him for taking something away
that's not constitutional.
Literally not constitutional.
Exactly.
And so the practical side of it, apart from the Constitution, is it has just been a horrible failure. Like the Department of Education has been
1976. 76?
I think it was it 80 something? Maybe it was.
No, I was doing Carter.
You're right. I think it was.
It was doing Carter. So at least in his minute. So before 80. So
our test scores have steadily declined.
Yes.
We have. So what's funny?
Why would you pay for something that's continually declining?
Right. The whole concept of this is a horrible thing is usually based in a lot of complete misinformation. For example, I can't remember the technical names, This is where I wish I had a really great memory and I could remember the specific names of these different acts. I think one's like that, not Stamp Act. I don't remember. Is it Stamp Act? There's these different specific programs that people thought were a part of the Department of Education that were going to close down. That was going to cause people with autism, kids with autism, and kids with a disability, and all these different things to like be left out in the cold. Turns out though, the ones that were part of the Department of Education just got transferred to a different department. And some of them weren't even a part of the Department of Education.
Anyway,
it had nothing to do with it.
Like free lunch.
The lunches, it wasn't even part of the Department of Education. But confirmation bias has pushed the left to see this, and every single time they hear an argument that sounds really good, like these different things that are going to be closed down, they latch onto it. And I've talked to them. I've talked to multiple people, and it's like they refuse, right? They will not concede, even though I can be like, no, that's not, the things you're listing are literally not.
Yeah.
But they're like, it's still horrible. Why would you delete the Department of Education? It's like, we're horrible in education. We need to have the Department of Education. I'm like, we're horrible in education because the Department of Education, like, it's not helped. Like, it would be different if we had like a lot of different data, and each year it was like up and down, and it's like, okay, you can make an argument, but we have now no causation. Like, it's not. We don't know for sure that the Department of Education is the reason it declined, but we have no reason to believe that it was helping the situation.
Right.
Like, we have no rational reason. And then on top of that, with the waste, you have to ask yourself, like, how is this at all a good idea? Because usually with an organization in economics or in markets, if an organization is this wasteful, they go out of business, right?
Yes.
That's how the market drives progress.
Right.
And so again, I've had a belief, kind of a hypothetical plan or concept for how education can be done better. Obviously, I believe in homeschooling is like the best route, but it's not feasible for everyone. And I do believe that free markets is the best way to go.
Well, so you hit it. I'm playing with the idea of micro schools. Like, I do an after school program. Like, I would like to evolve that into something more comprehensive, where it gives parents an option to say, hey, maybe homeschooling is not my thing for a particular set of home dynamics, whatever, right? But here's another option, right? The fight to maintain a federal program that then mandates that this is where your kid is going to go. And then I have to seek permission for my kid to go somewhere else. Or never have enrolled my kid, right? Right. So for some, this holding on to a ship that is sinking, right, is madness. It really is.
Strange.
And the only solution over the years, watched it with Bush and his No Child Left Behind, and then all the iterations that came after that, it has been about one thing. They need more money. They need more money.
Yeah.
They need more money. But the teachers need to get paid more. They need more money. Why are they buying, school supplies, blah, 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 right? But I'm like, we keep giving more money, and the math and literacy rates continue to go down, right? We have now schools who can't even do the bare minimum, right, of reading and writing and arithmetic. Now they want to become the social institutions, right? So like they have some schools in Little Rock that want to almost function like my organization functions, right? So you got school during the day, then there's an after school program. Then they can come here and parents can get like medical services and things like that, where it's this one institution where really the kid never has to leave, right? So from the time they get there to the evening, and then we can have parents come here, community schools, it's called, to where we can continue, and I'm gonna press the word indoctrination, into this government school, right? So not only will we continue to fail at trying to educate them in reading and mathematics, But now we're going to have influence over what their values are, their mental health, physical health, food, nutrition. Like, those are those subtle things that's the march from towards socialism, towards, dare I say, communism. Instead of saying, hey, you know what? Let's do away with this institution. Press it back down to the states, like you said.
Yeah.
10th Amendment. And y'all states figure it out. And if you find out that Tennessee has a better education program than Arkansas, then you're going to have to make a choice. Maybe that's not the only variable you got to consider, right? Maybe Tennessee, I don't think they do. They have no income tax. Oh, and now they have better education. Maybe I do need to pick up my family and move and go there. But that forces that state to be like, why do we have people fleeing Arkansas and going to Tennessee? Let's look at these things. But people are so held on. I'll say this, and I'll shut up. When I leave home and go to work, there's this house that's got a sign up that says, public dollars remain in public schools, to that effect, right? And I'm like, okay, fine. Sure. Then I'm like, I don't have any kids in public school.
Right.
Period. So why do I want my dollars to go there?
Right.
The retort is, well, because it'll be a societal benefit. Show me how.
Right.
If the literacy and math rates have gone down, next, y'all trying to adopt influence over children's behavior, but you just told me this is a school to prison pipeline, right? So kids who are in public school get exposed to law enforcement, get in trouble now, and get in a fight that automatically put in the juvenile system,
which
right? It's going down.
Yeah.
Why do I want my public dollars to go to a place that's producing higher literacy rates, low math scores, and more, and I'll do this, black males going from public school to the prison system?
Yeah.
Why would I want my dollars going there?
Yeah. What I find fascinating is again, this is a psychological thing, right? In society, it's become a psychological. We were talking about the partisans. It's clearly a partisan psychological thing that's going on where Trump does something, and no matter what the logic is or the facts are, you have to be against it, basically. Like, and now I have seen some people that are anti-Trump that have actually, applauded him on very, very specific things here and there. But with the Department of Education, it's an easy one to vilify. It's easy one to be against him on, because again, on the front, it looks bad, right? Like, you took away a Department of Education, right? Sounds bad.
Yeah.
You go like one or two layers deeper, and you're like, okay, it's clearly not as bad as I thought.
Right.
But people generally don't, especially if it means having to go against your confirmation bias.
Yeah.
But what I find on an individual level, when I've talked to people about education, or this is a thing, so I get a lot of homeschool reels on Instagram, and when I'm scrolling through, I'm a comment guy. I love reading the comments, right? And there's almost every single homeschool video that's like talking about homeschooling being superior, or talking about how homeschool life is great, or whatever it is. There's always some public schoolers, or probably parents of kids that are public schoolers, that are in the comments going, yeah, but like homeschoolers have this issue or whatever. And then people are like responding, they're like, but public schoolers have those issues too. Like, you're listing things like, oh, they're not social, or they have social problems. What do you get in trouble for in public school? Socializing.
But so here's the thing. If my homeschooler gets in a fight at home, go to your room.
They're not going to prison.
I'm gonna beat that ass.
Right.
Right? If my public schooler if my student gets in trouble at school, gets in a fight, he's immediately arrested and sent to juvenile hall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which do you prefer?
Right. And which one has provided the better results in history? What I find fascinating and strange, and it's just such a weird thing to me, is that we have history in abundance. Like, we have it all very accessible. Now, you can make the argument that history is written by the winners, and there's like some, but overall, we can see history, and people don't generally, that on the left or the right, I don't hear them saying, oh, the main history we have is just falsified. That's not the conspiracy theory that's undergirding these ideologies. It's right there in front of your face. We have the history to prove these things don't work or that the government's not reliable. And it's like, provide me an example of where government is provided the bukus of money that we're providing them and then handles it well and actually delivers on the promises that they're trying to deliver. But then you're going to, whenever someone proposes another thing, right, homeschooling, for example, and says, this has been pretty great, you're going to, because you were public school or because you're public schooling your kids, you feel this knee-jerk reaction, this need to justify your own choices or your own life by saying, well, there's problems with what you're, like there's small issues or things that, okay, fair enough.
Right. That's what any.
Are there issues with what? Yes, there's issues with public school. You're acting as if because it's not perfect, that it's like we should go back to the government, which we know, like it's like you have an individual level of responsibility or individual variable, right? Like each parent, you know, might be good or bad. They might not do a good job versus the government, who we know is like, it's like you're basically saying the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, but the devil you don't has the highest test scores in the country.
Right.
Like homeschool, like literally people will comment that and either people will be like, no, it's not true, or they'll ignore those comments. Like the public schoolers don't really respond to that. But homeschoolers score, I think, whenever I was a kid, it was 20% higher on all standardized tests than public schoolers on average. And people just hate that. They don't want to even address that fact. Like, and usually when they do respond, it's like, well, yeah, they may be smart, but they're like super awkward.
Yeah, I think, you know,
and it's like, or they're not normal. And I'm like, I don't want my children to be normal. Name someone in history who is normal.
Who had a great impact, you mean?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Name someone in any part of history that you really admire and you look back on and go, they really had it together, who was normal.
It's kind of like that what is that bumper sticker? What was it? Well-behaved women
never make history or something.
Never make history?
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's just take that principle and apply it to this right now. Right. But Thomas Sowell, he talks about how there's trade-offs. There's not solutions, there's trade-offs, right? And then I think there was a thing that came across TikTok one day that showed the evolution. It was an image, the evolution of education, how it went from the home. It was like a mom, a dad in around a village or something like that, right? Like one or two people. And it just kept evolving, like to like the 1800s. Then you got the schoolhouse and all that kind of stuff. And you got the kids sitting rows and all that kind of stuff to where it is now. And it was just curious for how long it was homeschooled.
Yeah.
And the short amount of time actually has been the collectivist approach to education, you know, with Russian influence and German influence.
And Rockefeller.
Yes. So shoving everybody one behind the other, getting the same thing, right? Just opening their skull, pour the information in, do a test, keep moving you on. You could also make an industrial influence, I guess, Rockefeller, right? To what we've got now versus like, how is it that we got so far over the millennia being homeschooled?
Right.
And all of the advances that we've had.
So the theory is that we've slowly been evolving as a human race, and that people need certain things, and a well-rounded education is now superior. And here's the thing, where's the data to prove that? That's my problem. Is like, I believe well-rounded education is a horrible, horrible philosophy, and we have been told to swallow that pill for the past probably, really in the past 100 years. It's really been shoved down.
When they're defining well-rounded, what do they mean?
So I always use analogies. Let's say you have a cup of sand, right? And you have, let's say you have 20 vials, or let's just say 10 vials, 10 major subjects or whatever. You have a cup of sand. If you, and this is reality, right? A kid only has a limited amount of time to be educated, okay?
Yeah.
So if you take that sand and then you pour it into every single vial equally, you're going to have a very small amount in each vial. Whereas if the kid, is in a state and in a society where maybe farming or engineering or whatever different industry makes more sense, or maybe they actually naturally already seem to have a lean towards something, which they do at an early age. I was good at math when I was like very young, right? I seem to have kind of a knack for math, and math is logic, and so you can kind of see where I kind of slowly trickled into like the area that I did, which is which I love: methodical, logical, analytical things, right? Thinking, and it obviously, now you could go, well, math means engineering. It's like, no, but it doesn't mean necessarily, art teacher or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So like, instead of a well-rounded education, I believe, and this is kind of what the concept of unschooling is like, okay, let's let the kids kind of decide what they want to like really be good at.
Okay.
And I believe in kind of mixing the two. I think that the kids do need a basic, well-rounded education up to the age of like, 12. I think up to the age of 12, every kid needs to learn read, write really well. Reading is super important.
Right.
Writing is pretty important. It's going to become less and less important as the time goes on, as far as literal handwriting. Spelling, I think, is still pretty important. Obviously, it's not going to be as important because we have spell check on everything. And whether or not you like those things, those evolve. Like, for example, cursive is not going to be a thing in 20 years. Hardly anyone's going to be writing in cursive. So certain things are going to fall away, and a lot of people hate that, but that's the reality. But the thing is, if you instead take the sand and pour it into the things that the kids, let's say 4 or 5 subjects that he's more interested in, he's going to have a way better chance when he graduates to go into those fields and actually having a chance to really be elite. Whereas otherwise, that's what's happening. I mean, look at college in America. We have gen eds, right? It's ridiculous. It makes no sense, right? You go to high school, then you go to college, you do high school again for the first 2 years. You're basically taking the same subjects again, and the whole point of college was supposed to prepare you for the work, the field, right? The actual market. But what happens is they waste 2 years in gen eds, and then they spend the next 2 to 4 years doing the specific thing, but they're still not even doing just a specific thing. Even later, you're still doing other subjects that you don't actually necessarily need for your career. I think trade schools have proven that they are better in so many capacities. Now, obviously, college education is necessary for certain types of things. I don't think it's, when I say necessary, I mean necessary in the society we live in now. It doesn't have to be. I believe that you could be a doctor without going to college. I believe that you could be an engineer without going to college. With homeschoolers, a lot of people do what's called, and I think public schoolers do it too. It's what is the technical name for it? You do a test basically to see where you're at, and if you test high enough, you can kind of skip over certain.
Like a placement test.
Yeah, kind of. And so, if you were to create a course, a 1-year course that like is for kids that have studied medical, like you remember Good Will Hunting, right? You seen Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon? You paid, I don't remember, I think, I don't remember what it was because it was an older movie, but let's just say what college is nowadays. You paid $50,000 or $40,000 for an education you could have got for $1.50 in late fees at the library. So the concept is that if children have the discipline and have the upbringing that leads them down a path, let's say they want to be a doctor, and they really study it since they're like 16 years old, and they study until they're 20, and then they already kind of know the stuff that doctors generally know. Why can't they go right into like take a 6-month course or whatever it takes to make sure they actually know the material, right? None of these multiple choice questions, right? Like I think it's Sweden, but there was this documentary done about education systems in other parts of the world in Europe, and there was this country that has like one of the best education systems, like really high test scores, really like lower depression, like just a great system. And they like said one of the things they cannot understand is why Americans use multiple choice. When they do a test, they have a blank line and you write the answer. If you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. And so there's things like that are built into our education system to kind of make us get kids through. And it's like, what if you instead actually just started rewarding genuine education? And then if the kids were smart enough, they wanted to become a doctor, and they didn't want to go through through college and stuff, then they they do all the schooling, then they take a course to prove that they know it.
Yeah.
They still should have to do, what does the doctors do? They have to walk alongside real doctors for like a certain, what's it called?
The internship or the residency. Yeah.
That is all,
Yeah.
necessary. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
But as far as college, I mean, look at being a pastor, right? I believe you should go to seminary or have understudy training under a pastor. I believe that's biblical. But the concept that there's certain denominations, even mine included, that if you have gone to college, you automatically have an easier path forward. To me, even if your college degree has nothing to do with theology, I think that's ridiculous. We've set up a standard in society, and it's crumbling now as we speak.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm looking forward to watching. Like I've been waiting for this for years because the college system has been broken for so long.
Yeah, as a college professor myself, I think there's students there that don't need to be there. There's students there that shouldn't be there, and it's becoming a money pit. Administrative overhead, right, versus the amount of development that needs to happen. The actual level of the student is tragic.
And I want to be clear, there is a immense amount of good that comes from college for people that use it properly. For kids that go to party and go to have the experience. I remember this. There's this homeschool channel called Blimey Cow. Shout out to Blimey Cow. I used to watch, and they would do little skits. And at one point, they were talking about. I think he was talking about college. I don't remember if it was a little comedy sketch or if he was actually being serious. But he said, "Why would it?" Because his friends were all like, go for the experience. You got to go for the experience. He's like, "Why would I spend $30,000 on an experience when I could spend $30,000 traveling the world and get that experience?" Because there's a lot of people that go to college because of the experience, or because their parents are pushing them to do it because their parents believe that it's necessary. But the parents aren't keeping up with the times of like what's happening and how the college education is degraded and the price is elevated. It's more of an economic decision. Like I could make all kinds of fundamental arguments about why education should be done by the parents and things like that. But the truth is, if you are looking at the actual data, colleges are not worth it. In general, there are people out there who are disciplined and dedicated, and they go to college and they make the connections, they use it, and they absolutely benefited from it, 100%. It happens all the time. But the vast majority of kids that I've talked to and college students, they're like, I don't know what I'm here for, or they're switching their major, or they're kind of in this zone of uncertainty, and it's like, you're in college. That's not supposed to be the time where you're in the zone of uncertainty. That's the time you're supposed to be like honing your skills down to where you can go into the field and actually offer something. But instead, we're having these college graduates go into the field going, I guess I'm going to work at Walmart. And I've seen it literally, even homeschool friends of mine.
It's your $100,000 debt now.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And then on top of that, you're going to go turn around and go, my bad decisions and my parents' bad decisions. Well, the government needs to pay for that. We need our debt canceled. It's like, okay, no, like you don't get to do that. You have to take responsibility for your decisions. Even in a society, like as a society, we've kind of built this up where we've let this happen, even though the data has been around for a long time. The college is not necessarily necessary for general jobs, but we push kids. And I mean, even people who I've talked to parents who are like, all about how, it's indoctrination. Like, I don't really trust colleges. And then they turn around and they tell their kids, like, if you don't go to college, like, I'm kicking you out, basically. It's like, it's so ingrained into our mindset, which it's really crazy because like you said, this whole experiment is new. This whole collective education system is brand new, and there's no actual evidence. And I don't think there has been really hardly any evidence at all. The only argument I can think of is like looking at certain European countries that do a really good job of it. But most of those European countries don't do school even close the way we do it. They do a lot less hours each day. The kids have a lot more free time. And I think that's like one of the most important things for children in development. Like they need that free time to figure out problems on their own. But they also need problems, right? You don't lock them in a room and then be like, I'm homeschooling, right? And some parents do that. And they give homeschoolers a bad name, and that can be addressed. The question is it best addressed by a government that's then the same people that were inadequate in the Department of Education and every single facet of their job and consistently have been so in history, should we rely on them to be the ones that are then pointing the fingers to the parents and going, well, no, you need to jump through these hoops? I don't see that as a viable solution either.
You know, you talk about, I think some of the other underlying things is, you know, from a utilitarian argument is being made that you know, this is for the common good, right? And so, but one of the flaws in that is a few thinking that the common good all need the same thing. And it's just not true at all. And so when you go in believing, have a job thinking that the student who lives in Conway, Arkansas is in need of the same education as a student that lives in Riverside, California, right? And the student that lives in Timbuktu, Appalachia, Kentucky, right? They all need the same education. No, they don't. But you're not going to know that because you're sitting in Washington, D.C., just looking at a map, and then we're just going to redistribute some dollars across these places and say this is the education standard that has to be met by these students across the board, and it's not working. It's not working.
I could see the devil's advocate side of this being, we were talking about kind of earlier, the free market of the state's government, basically, like doing the education. I actually would go even farther and say I believe in a hypothetical experimental world. I wouldn't say that I know for sure it would work, but I think it would be worth at least thinking through, would be a literal market-driven education system where even the state governments aren't really having a too strong of a hand in education.
Right.
Because there are certain states. Let's take Oregon, or not Oregon's not a good one, but Montana, or these states that are like very sparsely populated. They don't have a lot of income. They don't have a lot of resources, and it's ostensibly. You could definitely make the argument that, okay, these states are going to be left out to dry. And like you said, they could move, but let's say that state has a lot of coal or has a lot of resources in this area that these families need to be working in for our country to thrive, And so those families don't need to leave that state. But here's the thing. If I can have Wi-Fi delivered to me for a certain price each month in Timbuktu, around the country, basically, there's very few places that don't have some Wi-Fi services. If I can have that for $4,500 a month or whatever, then why wouldn't the market be able to make money? And it would incentivize companies to do a good job with education in those.
Yeah. So if you had but that cycles back around to our original discussion about about tariffs and things like that. I was listening to an interview how we are protecting jobs of the 20th century and not thinking about the 21st century. In other words, we need to innovate.
Oh man, you're bringing something up.
Why are we not innovating? Yeah. Why, unions, these groups that are fighting to maintain, and he said a lot of Trump supporters are individuals that are seeking to maintain 20th century jobs, and we're not looking forward. We're not unleashing the power of individuals, even in terms of our educational process, to how do we think forward in the 21st century?
Yeah.
Because some of these jobs that are being done in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a home builder. He was like, I build houses now with robots off an assembly line. Those individuals that have voted for Trump, I don't need them anymore.
Right.
They need to be thinking, what's the new job?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation yesterday about this, and then the day before that, I was the reason I had that conversation was because I was talking to Sage or ChatGPT about this very thing, and I use my ChatGPT account with my business team, and so I either delete a lot of chats that I have with it because I don't want it seem weird, because I do. It is a really great tool to think through things because it can add different angles to what you're thinking about, and I was like, you know what? This has been something that's kind of been in the back of my mind for the past year or so since AI has really become on the scene. And the more that I learn about AI, the more I learn about robotics right now. And the more I see, if you track the technological evolution over the years, the past 70 years, for example, if you look at the pattern it looks like within 10 years, assuming the conservative people that we were talking about that are really old-fashioned and are hanging on, assuming that the luxury starts to relinquish their grip, because that's what technology does, right? Like people that were all about conservative values eventually got a microwave, right? Like they didn't want to like let go of certain things, but eventually, you know, I'm going to get a refrigerator.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the, you know. So what's going to happen in my mind is the AI and robotics market will take over basically 60% of the jobs in the U.S. in the next 10 to 15 years. Again, that number could be a little longer depending on how tightly people hold on to things. I mean, you look at Tucker Carlson, right? He did an interview one time and he talked about how if he was president, like became president that day, the first day he would pass an executive order that bans the development of self-driving semi-trucks, because the vast majority of high school graduated men become truck drivers, and it would put these men who are you know not able to jump into those new jobs out of work. And so I was talking to Sage, and I was like, I think that I would like to create a think tank, and this is something I've had this idea, long-term goal since I was young, probably really since I was 18 or 19, that I wanted to create a think to solve problems, right? All kinds of different problems. But the one right now at the forefront of my mind is the next 20 or 30 years, or even 100 years of society is going to change way more than people realize. Because, you know, the whole classic adage, there's nothing new under the sun. People kind of have this comfortability with like, okay, nothing's going to change that fast. But if you look again at the pattern of technological advances, it's become shorter distances between each technological advance. And the advances a lot of times have become, they're not just stair steps. They're like each one is bigger than the last. And so I did a video actually for a client, and I like used stock footage, but I like went back and I started like looking at the timelines, and I looked at all the technological advances and stuff, and I did this video with a clock that was sort of semi-transparent, and it slowly, I think the clock was like fully there, and it slowly drifted back behind the footage, and you see the technological advances from the phone to the, you know, or the printing press to the, you know, so forth and so on, and you see the time getting faster and faster and faster, and the stuff's flashing. And when I did that video, I had this epiphany, and this was about 3 years ago, I think I did it. That was when I really first was like, oh my gosh, if this pattern even sort of continues, we're going to be heading into a society that's unrecognizable in 10 or 15 years. And what does that mean for mental health? What does that mean for the things that we kind of define ourselves with, which is our work and our value that we provide for society? You know, how are people going to find that value and find that you know, self-esteem and worth and things like that whenever AI is doing everything? Not to mention, how are they going to make money? And so I was like, what if, you know, people who saw that coming and weren't on the side of just making money used AI actually now as a tool to think of solutions for that problem? And I had it kind of spitball some ideas, and I was like, some of these are really good. And I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. Actually taking the time to use the AI specifically in a way to counter the effects, because it's going to happen. It may not happen quite as fast as my prediction, but it doesn't matter really. And it's not a matter of like despair. It's not a matter of like, you know, losing your head and just panicking. It's a matter of going, okay, if this is a potential future, why not prepare for it as best as we can? And you're right. We are preparing. We're trying to sustain these 2020 or 20th century jobs, and we're going into the 25th century. Like, we don't realize what. Like, we're going into a century that we have literally only sort of conceptualized with movies. And we are not prepared. mentally. I don't think the society is prepared because we have a mentality that this is going to be a slow progression, and we have been desensitized to these massive technological revolutions. Like if you were to go back 15 years and then bring someone from 15 years ago, we used to talk about, people always made the analogy, go back in time to like the 1700s and stuff, and bring someone. If you go back 10 or 15 years and bring someone here and go, hey, talk to this person, that's not a human being.
Right.
That's an AI.
Right.
What's an AI? That's something that is literally all machinery. It's coming up with answers completely, like I remember, and I still to this day hate my Google Home and my Alexa because they are so stupid. I'll ask it a question and usually it's supposed to Google it, and sometimes it'll be like, I don't know what you're saying. And I'm like, I couldn't have been more clear.
Yeah.
Like just Google it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking. But I can ask ChatGPT, and it's going to immediately answer.
Yeah.
And it's going to answer with like probably 80 to 95% accuracy generally. And so if we could just use these tools and use the prophetic mind that some of us have, and instead of just cowering in fear, which a lot of people are just like, no, AI, no, we got to stop it. It's like, okay, that's not going to get us anywhere. It's going to come. It's going to happen. So you can either be on the side of trying to use it for good and trying to undergird us for the future and try to figure out ways for human beings to live a valuable, preferably somewhat happy or fulfilled life or meaningful life. Or you can pretend that you being a naysayer is going to somehow keep you from being jobless and depressed in 10 or 15 years. So I'm got a buddy who's a really smart guy, and I'm going to be talking to him soon. We're going to sit down and we're going to start brainstorming and kind of see what that would look like. My actual plan, I've been trying to not tell my plans, but since the podcast, I'll make an exception, because I heard from a psychology reel on TikTok or Instagram, but I think it's actually true. It's I've heard it. I think even Jordan Peterson talks about it, but it's the theory that if you say the things you're planning on doing, it gives a dopamine hit, right? And so you're a lot of people who struggle with being driven or disciplined, they'll say the things they're planning and tell everyone the things they're planning, but then they'll never do the things they're planning. I mean, this is the third time we try to start this podcast, so
hey,
I'm fully aware.
Right?
I'm fully aware of the irony here. But that being said, I think that this is one of those things where I think it's worth mentioning, right? I want to start a think tank concept, right, where I then lay out using AI. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to do it all on my own, but I have this really powerful tool, and I want to create an actual pitch, essentially. Not a business plan per se, but kind of a there's an actual term for it in the market, but it's where basically you come up with a business plan essentially, or a brand, or a concept. And sometimes usually the business plans are like, this is how I'm going to make money. But I think there's also some people that do it based on this is the way I'm going to make impact. I want to like do good. And then you reach out to the right investors and you reach out to as many as you can to then invest. And my plan is this is a crazy, ridiculous goal, but I'm aiming high. But I really think that if I can put together a really comprehensive plan that really compels and inspires, I think I could get investors to invest like, upward of $1 million. And if I could then have the resources to put together a team of people, of free thinkers and people that disagree, but then actually like tackle real world issues with actual capital behind it, to where we can go, okay, let's do it. Like before this idea, I had this dream of becoming a millionaire and putting together a kind of an engineering think tank / team of people that were like, you've seen the people that are building the Iron Man suit, the people that are building, this dude who's working on taking plastic and turning it into fuel, and all these different things. And I think that if you could get all these people in the same room, and you could give them an actual like budget where they're like, okay, we're getting paid, and inspire them, if you have the right leadership, and I don't think that's me, but I think that I have the idea, and I think that if I can find the right leadership and we can like put together a team, that we could potentially like really change the world. Really change the trajectory of what the future holds, especially now that AI is here. I feel like it's much more pressing. I think that we really need to have more people willing to take those chances and push the needle in a direction of progress. Because right now, all I'm seeing for the most part is either people are just trying to take advantage of AI to make a quick buck, or people who are fear mongering it and so afraid of it. And neither one of those is going to actually help us in the future. Not that I can see.
Right, right.
But I think the biggest hitch in that plan is that the next generation was indoctrinated. And so we have a lot of philosophical issues that we're kind of battling to get a group together in the same room and be able to work together in a peaceful fashion. And that's why I said I don't think I'm the leader, but I want to find someone that can actually like inspire and bring together people and actually create a vision that hopefully is productive.
That's good.